it's not on the slide. Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, my name is Michelle Hayes. I am the founder and chief exec of Resurrected Bites. So back in, oh, sorry, my mouse is a bit too sensitive. I'll go back in. Oh, this is going well. Back in 2016, a group of us started Zero Carbon Harrogate, which obviously is aiming to try and make Harrogate a more sustainable place. I was heading up the food group for that project. At the same time, I was also, I was very interested in food production and food waste and how we could tackle it on a local level. And food waste was the thing that came up as, is that bar in the middle of the slides, or is it only me that can see a bar in the middle of the slides?
I can't see a bar.
Right, okay, that's good. So as I'm sure many of you are aware, food waste is a huge issue. Around 931 million tonnes of food gets wasted globally every year. And it's a huge greenhouse gas emitter because when food is left to rot, it produces methane, which is 20 times more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide is. The UN described it as if food waste was a country, it would be the third largest carbon emitter after the whole of the emissions of China and the whole of the emissions for the US. So it's a really significant problem. In the UK, 70% of food waste is post-farm gate, i.e. comes from households. One of the speakers we had at one of our Zero Carbon Harrogate events really inspired me by saying it's one of the easiest things we can do to reduce our carbon footprint locally. And I know we're always all looking for ways to reduce our carbon footprint. And it's not just about the emissions from the methane, it's also about the use of land. So if a third of all food goes to waste, you've got a third of land that's being used unnecessarily. All the water that's used, all of the fossil fuels that are used for harvesting the food and transporting the food and making the packaging. And obviously there's a lot of deforestation. And personally, I just find it awful to think of all those millions of animals that get slaughtered every year just to end up in landfill. And in a recent survey by the Food Foundation, 15% of UK households are in food insecurity. And the definition of food insecurity is not only not having enough food, but not having enough of the right nutrition. Can't get this to move on there. So at the same time as being involved with Zero Carbon Harrogate, I started a post at St Mark's Church and I conducted a survey of the perceived unmet needs in Harrogate. It was supposed to be just for my church's parish and I ended up doing it for the whole of central Harrogate. And in doing that, I contacted, first of all, I asked local people what they felt the unmet needs were. Then I went to the organisations that addressed those needs to see whether it was a genuine unmet need or an issue around signposting. And if it was a genuine unmet need, then I looked at potential solutions for meeting those needs. And I can't remember what this is called, word cloud or something, but you can see the things that are biggest are the things that were the most common. So loneliness and isolation was the main finding, along with signposting. But there's also a lot of hidden poverty in Harrogate, which a lot of people just don't recognise. And it's very difficult to get funding in Harrogate because everybody always assumes that everything's all rosy and there's no poverty. But the reality is I helped set up the Harrogate Food Bank and I used to be project leader there, and day in, day out, I would see people coming in who you wouldn't expect to be in food poverty. So in looking at the solutions, I came across the Real Junk Food Project. So this guy is called Adam Smith. He used to be a chef who also was appalled by the amount of food waste in the catering industry and wanted to do something about it. So in 2012, he started the first Page Your Fuel cafe in Leeds, and it literally saved a guy's life. There was a young man who was on his way to go and commit suicide because he was lonely and he was hungry, had no money. Saw this Page Your Fuel cafe, thought, well, I can go in there and get some food. And then he wanted to give back after he'd had his meal, so he started volunteering. and found a community and saved his life. And I just thought, what a brilliant concept. So I decided to do the same, and that's how Resurrected Bites was formed. So in January 2018, I opened the first cafe at St. Mark's Church, and it was originally under St. Mark's governance, and each cafe, the cafe also had a pop-up shop. But I soon realised from the queues of people out the door that it would actually be a really useful thing for other areas. So I asked other churches if they'd like us to run a cafe in their building. I didn't want it to look like St. Mark's was taking over in other churches, so I set it up as a community interest company. At the time, we were making enough money to cover our costs, so we didn't need to go for charity status. So in January 2020, I opened a second cafe in Knaresborough, and in March 2020, I opened a third cafe in Harrogate, which, as you can imagine, was fantastic timing because we were just about to hit global pandemic. So I closed all of the cafes, but knew there'd be a huge amount of food waste. If you think back to in the run up to the lockdown, all the shops were on overdrive because everybody was panic buying, and then suddenly the lockdown came really quickly, and they just couldn't stop the ordering in time. So there was the amount of food that we were collecting, and some businesses were just completely closing. So thankfully the church had closed because I just filled the church with food basically. And in the early days, there was a lot of people who you wouldn't normally expect to be in food poverty who needed help. People, had £2 million houses and a very expensive car on their drive, whose businesses had closed overnight and had no money and big outgoings. So we were delivering to them, and a lot of elderly people who were too afraid to go out to the shops, understandably. But then over time, it leveled out to the people who would normally be in food poverty or food insecurity. And so for about an 18-month period, we ran a free home delivery service, and my son built a shopping platform so that people could go on and choose what they wanted rather than just delivering a box of things that might not be what the family wanted. And we fed the equivalent of 15,808 people over about a 17-month period. And that was across Harrogate district. And I realised the scale of food poverty in the area. So we wanted to get the cafes reopened because obviously isolation was becoming even more of a problem during the pandemic. So we closed the food delivery service to get ourselves ready to reopen the cafes, but we didn't want to launch people back into food poverty. So I looked at various models for sort of social supermarkets, and came up with one that enabled us to open a grocery in a deprived part of our Harrogate. So from the shopping portal, we could see the hotspots of need. Because transport's a real issue in Harrogate, I wanted to have smaller groceries that were in areas where the need was most profound, so that people could find it easier to get to rather than being in a big central one, which people would struggle to get to and from with lots of bags of shopping, because they do get a lot of food. So we opened one in Harrogate and one in Knaresborough, because Knaresborough was also another area where there was an awful lot of need. And then, so we'd got two cafes open by that point. We opened a third cafe in May. And unlike you, Angela, I had a real nightmare getting charity status. So interesting to see that, to hear that you found it so easy. So I got it on the third attempt. But the reason we couldn't get charity status was because the cafes didn't meet the charity act, because they're open to everybody. And the reason for that is because we focus on food waste, because it's an important environmental issue. And by doing that, because they run on a pay-as-you-feel basis, it means that if people are coming in because they can't eat in a commercial place, or they're coming in because they're lonely and they know they need somebody to talk to, they hopefully don't feel like they're being labelled and they're being stigmatised, but they feel like they're supporting an environmental cause. So I didn't want to change our model and stigmatise people, so I gave up on getting charity status for the cafes. So basically I've had to split the organisation. So we've got charity status for the groceries and the environmental aspects, but the cafes are still under the community interest company. So I'm basically running 2 organisations, 2 lots of accounts, 2 lots of meetings. It's all great fun, 2 lots of payroll. So our aims are to prevent good quality food from going to landfill or anaerobic digestion. So we redistribute around 2.15 metric tonnes every week from our warehouse. We have about 98 kilograms of waste a week, but we ensure that it doesn't go to waste because we have a guy who, well, two guys who've got livestock who come to collect the stuff that livestock can eat, and my dog eats anything that's got meat in it. We educate about food waste and encourage people to try and prevent it. We tackle food poverty through our cafes and our community groceries. And we tackle loneliness and isolation. Originally, the plan was to tackle loneliness and isolation through the cafes, but we soon realised that a lot of the people who come to our groceries, the only interaction they have in the week is by coming to our groceries. So it's an important thing that, you know, when people say to us, will you deliver to us? Because they've got into the mindset of, well, Resurrected Bites does deliveries. We really try and avoid that unless it's really, you know, absolutely essential, because it not only is it an important part of getting people out of the house and having some social interaction, but our team get to know them, and, you know, they get to know their situations, and we try and signpost them on to help as well. So the majority of our food comes from supermarkets. So we do about 66 collections a week, usually early in the morning or late at night when the shops are closing or just opening. We also sometimes get it from hotels and cafes and independent shops. We get food from FareShare, which is a national charity. They set food at the manufacturing level, so they get bigger quantities, and it ensures that we've got a much wider range of things that we can offer in our cafes and groceries. We get some from food manufacturers, though this is reducing because a lot of them are passing it on to organisations like FareShare or Jack Fulton's. So the amount of food that I get per location has dropped substantially over the past few years, which is a good sign that businesses are managing their waste a lot better. But obviously it leaves me with the problem that we just don't have enough food. So we but again, if we do have too much, we've got a group called Harrogate Waste Not Want Not. So we move food around the different charities if we've got too much stuff, and likewise if they've got too much stuff, we all move it on between ourselves to avoid the waste. So this is our 3 cafes, one in Harrogate, one in Killinghall, one in Knaresborough, and as I said, all on a pay-as-you-fill basis, and also each one has a little shop. Last year we did 8,300 covers in the cafes, and a lot of those covers will include people coming in for breakfast, staying for lunch, and then having tea and cake afterwards. So they, you know, they make a day out of it really, and it meets an awful lot of needs. So it's great. But obviously we do rely on people coming in who are also able to donate so that we can try and cover our costs. The community groceries are specifically for people in food poverty, whereas the cafes are for anybody. People can refer to themselves to us, or they can be referred to us. The common misperception is that it's people on benefits, and that's not always the case. There's a lot of working families who just can't manage because they're not getting any support in the cost of living crisis. They pay £5 for a 1 to 3 person household, or £10 for a 4+ family, and they get at least 10 times the value. Actually get an awful lot more than that. And it's like a little shop. They walk around with a basket, and they get a set number of items from each section: chilled, frozen, fresh fruit and veg, bakery, store cupboard items. And we also do non-food items so that people can wash their clothes, clean their houses, have toiletries, put nappies on their babies, feed their pets, that kind of thing. And last year we did 5,800 shops were done in the past financial year. So this is what one of our shops looks like. We try and make it as welcoming as possible. We've got an amazing team who are very good at, you know, welcoming our customers in and getting to know them. We have a warehouse at Disability Action Yorkshire in Harrogate, which is where the engine room, I call it, because we couldn't manage with us that we did in the early days, and it was a nightmare. So all of the food comes in there, gets weighed in, so we know how much we're stopping from going to landfill. Obviously it has to be quality controlled, make sure all the labelling's right, it's stored correctly, etc. and then the team process the orders to go out to the groceries and cafes. So one of the great things about our partnership with Disability Action Yorkshire is that their learners can come and volunteer in various locations. We've got the warehouse, the cafes and the groceries to help them gain experience so they can get into the job market as well. So our challenges at the moment, so last year my challenge was getting charity status, and financial sustainability as well is still an ongoing problem. But we spend about £40,000 a year buying food in as well for the groceries to make sure that we've got enough of a range of items for the grocery customers. And so the store cupboard items, you just don't get them very often at all. So it's a lot of that needs to be bought in. So we are trying to find more and more suppliers that we can, and increasing our network of food businesses who've still got food surplus in their supply chain. Another challenge is that some supermarkets are great at managing their food waste and others are terrible. And so we're supposed to collect, and then the collector goes and there's like, oh, there's nothing for you to collect today. When we know the reality is there's a warehouse full of food that we should be able to collect, but they just haven't got around to sorting it, and it's all going to end up going in the bin. And another challenge for us is to reduce our waste. We do, you know, at the end of the cafe, if there's any food left over, if it's not a big enough quantity for us to reuse in another cafe, we always make sure that we give it away to people in the cafe or to volunteers to ensure we're not sending anything to waste. And the other thing I was just going to mention was the Harrogate Clothes Bank. So I set this up in 2016 to basically I was helping the first wave of Syrian refugees when they arrived in the area, and obviously they were arriving with very little from Lebanon into a freezing cold country. They were very cold, so I set up a clothes bank, and then in 2018, once most of the waves of refugees had arrived by that time, we opened it up to anybody who wanted to use it. So I don't run it anymore. Thankfully, somebody else has taken on running it, but it does basically what it says. You know, people donate clothes and we give them away for free. So again, you know, it gets that whole sustainability thing going of ensuring that clothes don't end up in landfill as well. And it's greatly used and very, very much appreciated by people who are on a low income in the area. And has anybody got any questions?
Thank you, Michelle. Bryony's got her hand up straight away. Just before Bryony, Michelle, can I just say, because that was really inspiring what you said, because I know we've had a few sort of emails over the last sort of couple of years, just on and off. I don't think I'd realised the sheer scale of what you've got going on there. So yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. Sorry, Bryony. Yeah.
No, completely agree. Yeah, it's a huge operation and really, really impressive. Yeah, the breadth of the work that you're doing. I was wondering how you manage in terms of sort of split of staff and volunteers, and just a sense of the scale of the team to support you achieve all of this.
Yeah, so there's 2 of us that are full-time and 4 part-time, and 2 of those only work 8 hours a week. So it's quite a small staff team, but we've got about 160 volunteers, and we couldn't operate without the volunteers. They're just absolutely amazing. And some of them do one role, some of them do multiple roles. So some of them are split across the CIC and the charity because they're involved with both. But yeah, I had a team meeting on Monday because we've got quite a few new members of staff. I've had a real nightmare trying to get good staff, and we finally managed it, thankfully. But you know, I was asked them what they felt was the volunteer engagement was like, and somebody who volunteers for other organisations who's come on board as a manager said the engagement with our team is amazing compared to what he's seen in other places. So and they're really invested. And some of them are in it for the environmental aspects. Some are in it because of the food poverty aspects. You know, there's a whole range of reasons why people do volunteer. But yeah, we definitely couldn't work without them.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I think Richard's made a point, just what you've just touched upon, Michelle, like the range of benefits from the project, not just environmental but the social ones and everything else. Yeah, thanks Richard for that. Is anyone else? Yes, do you want to follow up? Yeah.
Sorry, having difficulty unmuting. Yeah, Michelle, thank you. That was just astonishing. You know, we all sort of look at Harrogate and think Harrogate is you know, this wonderful place where everything is rosy, but you know, to realise there's so many different issues there. I guess it's just a microcosm of all different places. How do you manage it? I mean, what was did you have background in sort of managing catering or retail or anything like that?
No, not at all. I used to be a research scientist, and then I was a project manager in clinical trials. So no
Wow.
experience of this at all. And I hate catering, to be quite honest. All of the times I've had to step in to be a cafe manager when we're short staffed, I'm like, oh no. But so no, I mean, obviously, because of my medical microbiology, I know I'm good on the food safety because I know what we can't risk. But no, I've just learnt on the job, basically.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Just astonishing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Any other questions?
And again, if anybody would be interested in doing this in your area, I'd be more than happy to talk to you about what our experiences